Good afternoon in New York, Eastern North America. Good morning, middle and western parts. Good evening in Israel, Europe, and Africa. And welcome, whatever time of day or night, for all of you who are joining us from all corners of the world. I'm Yael Danieli, founder and executive director of the International Center for Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short. Thank you for joining today's webinar presenting international 2025 publications by descendants of survivors of the Holocaust. This International Center for Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma webinar introduces 4 recent books by descendants of Holocaust survivors published during perhaps the most difficult time for Jewish life since the end of World War II. International panelists will share their grandparents and parents and their own journeys of repairing their family's historical ruptures from manifold, multidimensional, multidisciplinary, thoroughly explored contexts, each from a unique intergenerational perspective. Before we begin, I would like to thank the two of the publishers involved today, Robert Mandel and Jessica Case. Your moderator, I am a clinical psychologist, traumatologist, victimologist, and psychohistorian. Having developed the first program to help Nazi Holocaust survivors and their children in the 1970s, I have devoted much of my career to studying, treating, writing about, and preventing lifelong and multi-generational impacts of massive trauma worldwide, to ensuring victims' rights, the rights of future generations, and to reparative justice. My version of psychohistory is to conceive of it as we live it now, not as a list of past dates, events, and numbers, but as it shapes our decisions and ways of being today, every day. Today's first speaker is Aron Hirt-Manheimer. Aron was born in 1948 to Holocaust survivors in Feldafing, a displaced person camp in the United States-occupied Germany. He served as the editor of Reform Judaism magazine from 1976 to 2014, and as editor-in-chief of the Holocaust Library. His books include Jagendorf, Foundry, a memoir of the Romanian Holocaust and Jews, the essence and character of a people, co-authored with Rabbi Arthur Hertzberg. Joining Aron is Marty Yura. With a master's in psychology, Marty Yura served for 5 years as a military psychologist before turning to the study and teaching of yoga. Today, he works with both civilians and veterans, including those living with PTSD and other physical and mental health conditions, bringing together his backgrounds in psychology, mindfulness, and yoga to support healing and personal growth. Third is B. Luria, the daughter of 2 child Holocaust survivors, Saul and Evelyn Rebecca Luria, who escaped from Poland with 2 toddlers. B learned from them the importance of helping those in need and devoted her career to making a difference in the lives of others as a leader of nonprofit organizations and government agencies, an owner of 2 businesses, and an active volunteer in her community. Our 4th speaker is Todd Diamond. Born in Queens, New York, Todd delivers narratives that are unapologetically and raw and darkly humorous, a reflection of the borough that raised him. Whether it's sordid tales from his advertising career or stories about his family's Holocaust experiences, Todd resonates with those who prefer their prose served with a healthy dose of cynicism and unsweetened insight. Last but not least is Inbal Shlomi, MD, a granddaughter of Israeli Auschwitz survivor Hannah Shlomi. Inbal is a psychiatrist and psychotherapist who founded By Your Side, the first long-term inpatient unit in Israel for treating complex trauma at Merhavim Mental Health Center in Be'er Yaakov. A lecturer at Tel Aviv University, Inbal recently authored Everything Belongs to Nobody. Within an hour after the conclusion of the webinar, all registrants will receive the recording. We have 2 hours for the webinar, though we've been known for the most engaged audience who keeps us longer. Each of our presenters will speak for around 8 minutes. Aron and Marty will share 10, Following an interchange among the panelists, I will open the floor to questions or brief comments from the virtual audience, which also has a few surprises today. I will then invite our panelists to conclude today's webinar with their last words. Please use the Q&A function or chat function, and we will do our best to respond to as many questions and brief comments as we can. Feel free to direct your question to a particular author or to the full panel. I will be remiss if I don't mention that these coming 2 hours are historical in Washington, D.C. as well. So we are not only presenting a panel, we are praying very hard. I now have the honor of welcoming Aron Hirt-Manheimer. Aron, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Danieli. Thank you for this opportunity and for writing the foreword to our book. A wonderful foreword, and we're very grateful. My co-author, Marty Ura, and I were conceived in the Feldafing displaced persons camp. We are direct descendants of the surviving remnant, the term Jewish survivors used to describe themselves after their liberation. Leaders of the surviving remnant felt that they had a moral responsibility to usher in a more just and humane world. An editorial in the Free World, the journal of my birthplace, the Feldafing DP camp, declared, "We must show the world that we, the victims of Nazism, will always be the carriers of humanity." But as early as 1945, a leading spokesman of the surviving remnant expressed the fear that, quote, "mankind does not comprehend what we have gone through, and it seems to us that neither shall we be understood in the future." Elie Wiesel reiterated these fears in 1981 when he addressed the first world gathering of Holocaust survivors at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. "Here in the city of eternity," Wiesel said, "we must ask ourselves the painful question, Have we survivors done our duty? Has our warning been properly articulated? Has our message been accurately communicated? It is with fear and trembling, he continued, that something went wrong with our testimony. It was not received. Otherwise, things would have been different. Look at the world around us. Violence everywhere, hatred everywhere, racism, fascism, anti-Semitism. Had anyone told us when we were liberated that we would be compelled in our lifetime to fight anti-Semitism once more, or worse, that we would have to prove that our victims had indeed perished, we would not have had the strength to lift our eyes from the ruins. If only we could tell the tale, we thought the world would change. Well, we have told the tale, and the world has remained the same. We shall not give up. We shall not give in. It may be too late for the survivors, but not for our children, not for mankind. For the past 50 years, as an educator, journalist, and author, I have strived to amplify the humanitarian message of the saving remnant, most recently through the publication of our joint memoir, Sons of Survivors. But as I look around at the growing racism, anti-Semitism, hatred, and violence everywhere, I must ask myself the painful question: have we, children of survivors, done our duty? Has our message been accurately communicated? I fear that we have done no better than our survivor parents in bringing healing to our broken world. Sadly, the situation has gotten even worse since Elie Wiesel spoke to the gathered survivors in Jerusalem 44 years ago. Today, on top of Holocaust denial from the political right, we have Holocaust distortion on the left. This latest assault on truth and memory weaponizes the language of the Holocaust against the Jewish people. Filmmaker Michael Moore has gone so far as to appropriate the Nazi term final solution to describe the actions of Israel in Gaza. The most egregious slander is falsely accusing Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians. It is Hamas, not Israel, that has made the killing of Jews a central pillar of its jihadist ideology. Just read Article 7 of the founding document of Hamas, the Hamas Covenant of 1988, and you'll see it there. Earlier this month, I woke up to NPR's lead story proclaiming that the International Association of Genocide Scholars, IAGS, has passed a resolution that accused Israel of committing genocide in its war against Hamas. The mainstream media jumped on the story. What is the IAGS? According to an expose in the Free Press, anyone can become a member with just a $30 contribution. Of the current 500 members, 80 claim to be based in Iraq. And most deceptive of all, only 21.6% of the total membership supported the resolution. As one who has always advocated for a peaceful solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the high death toll on both sides of the war in Gaza fills me with pain. People seem more interested in casting blame than on finding a just and lasting peace. As the description of this webinar states, Jews are experiencing the most difficult time since the Holocaust. But we must not despair. In 2015, I asked Elie Wiesel in an interview if he was still hopeful for a better future. He said, "Yes, one must wager on the future. I believe it is possible, in spite of everything, to believe in friendship in a world without friendship, and even to believe in God in a world where there has been an eclipse of God's face. Above all, we must not give in to cynicism. To save the life of a single child, no effort is too much. To defeat injustice and misfortune, if only for one instant, for a single victim, is to invent a new reason for hope. As a child of survivors, I will not give up. I will not give in. It may be too late for us, but not for our children. not for mankind. Thank you.
Thank you, Aron. Marty, the other author of Sons of Survivors. Go ahead, please.
I thought you were going to say the other Marty because my wife's name is Marty as well. So
Yes.
I'm going to speak from a little different perspective than Aron. We're and from a kind of a personal take on this, and I think Aron and I are not atypical of a whole generation of second generation survivors, in that we did not inquire into our parents' histories until we were older adults. And I think people don't inquire unless something prompts them to do this, because it's a hard, long, dark dive to try to uncover what happened in an era that is you just can't understand. It's beyond the pale. The atrocities, the suffering. And one of the things that we realized is that despite the different approaches that our families had, with Aron's family being more disclosing and my family being committed to a conspiracy of silence in not revealing and not sharing virtually anything from their past. Despite that, we ended up pretty much in the same place of what we did know was just a small piece of what actually occurred. So different incidents prompted us individually to get to the point of our willingness to take this dive and to write this book. And the first thing that we noticed, we kind of secluded ourselves for a weekend, actually longer, about 4 days, and recorded, each of us, stories of what we knew of our parents' past. And it was startling to discover how little we knew. So we set off on this journey, a shared commitment to unveil as much as we could to determine how the Holocaust has gripped our lives. The fact that we're second generation, notwithstanding, there was a clear downflow of that energy, that traumatic energy that had an impact on our lives and it continues to. So we set out, and the cover of the book kind of captures this to an extent of the car in the middle, and we are moving. We're in the top of the picture, top of the book cover is Los Angeles, where we spent our formative years, and in the bottom is the infamous gate into Birkenau. And during this inquiry, we learned not only what happened to our parents to some extent, to of course a greater extent, but also how it affected us and how we were able, probably not typically of most people learning about trauma or their family traumas, and learning to the point where it empowered us. It was not only the burden, it was not only the angst and the knife sharp sensations and emotions that came as a result of this inquiry, but rather how our parents prevailed, regardless of their communication habits towards us. They, like that whole generation, did not look back. They looked forward. They were aware of the privilege of survival and the privilege of beginning a new life. So one way I kind of describe this is anchored in a Buddhist concept of 3 pillars. One is having a deep root of faith and not in a theological context, but having a deep root of faith and being able to endure a great ball of doubt, of not having nothing gets tied up at the end. There's no pretty package here. The doubt accompanies the inquiry, and the doubt, we learned, is healthy. And having a tenacity of purpose that our parents revealed, and again, that generation revealed and exhibited and demonstrated and lived moving forward. The horrors of the past did not stop them. We're the second generation. You read in the book our children, the third generation, how they were affected, and even the fourth generation, a very touching story of Aron's granddaughter and how she related to this trauma. So the subtitle of the book, Making Peace with Inherited Trauma, became very real and I think is very accessible. And one of the things also that influenced us so much is that we had each other to lean on. I am, both of us are quite sure that alone this would have been overwhelming. And I think most descriptions of past trauma are done from one person's perspective. But here, being able to do it together really opened up a whole array of new insights and provided strength for one another as we trafficked through this.
Thank you so much, Marty. Yes, between Aron and Marty, you sort of got the feeling of the book. But you have to read it, of course. And we move as I mentioned, the publisher of that book is Robert Mandel. And let's move to B. Luria, whose publisher is Pegasus. As I mentioned before, we are grateful to Jessica Case.
Thank you. I love how you call me B. Luria, because that's actually my family's name. It was changed by immigration to Luri. And Luria means in Hebrew to the light of God. And Luria, it is retraced back and signed up by the Grand Rabbi of Israel all the way to King David, or our branch of the Luris and a few others. And so I have great pride that that's our family name, and that I never changed my name when I got married because it was my name. My father used to joke, he put out his ring and he'd say, you know, kiss my ring, I'm a king. Well, who knew that he really was related to a king? But so the book that I wrote about my father, who's now 95 and not in very good health, is Life Must Go On. And it's the remarkable story of Saul Lurie, the Kovna Ghetto, and the tragic fate of Lithuania's Jews. And if you look at this picture, there's a, right here, I don't know if you can see it, is my father when he was 15 being liberated from Buchenwald. And then the picture on the bottom is of him, is Brooklyn, famous area in Brooklyn. So that was his journey, from hell to a new life. My father was 11 years old when he and his family were sealed into the Kovna Ghetto in Lithuania, and he survived 6 concentration camps at the ages of 11 to 15. And he, despite all the brutality that he experienced and witnessed and the heinous murders that he saw of family members and of other Jews, my father never gave up hope and fought with every ounce of his being to win against the Nazis. From the time his family was in the Kovna Ghetto, he had made the decision that he was going to outlive Hitler. And that was his entire motivation throughout his time of incarceration and brutality. His hope was quite extraordinary, considering that 96% of all Lithuanian Jews were murdered, and it was the highest percentage of any other country. And he ascribes a number of reasons as to why he survived. One of them is he believes in Beshert, which is it was meant to be. And there are a lot of instances of that happening, and just many, many miracles. I know the way to describe them. So he survived because he believes that his grandfather, who he loved dearly, who died the day before the war, before the Nazis invaded Kovna, was watching over him and guiding him and telling him what to do to escape incredibly dangerous situations. And he also survived because of the kindness of other people, which gave him hope. So there were Germans who saved him and his family's life, and there were prisoners of war who gave them a little bit of extra food, or hid the children. I mean, there were multiple people throughout this horrific environment that wanted to save the next generation, and took great risk to themselves to do so. And my father took a lot of risks in order to survive. I'll tell you two stories. One was his father and his brothers, his three brothers, were one of the tasks they were assigned was to take care of the stables, because they had owned a lumber business and they had 80 horses, and so they understood horses. And one day, one of his brothers heard that the Nazis were again rounding up the children in the Kovna ghetto to execute them. And my father had spent all of his time while he was in the Kovna ghetto just hiding, like trying to find ways to not be found. So his father and brothers took him and his cousin and my cousin's 8-year-old baby, and hid them inside the stable in a storage area where you put food during the winter to keep it cold. And they put some wood on top of it and some hay, and they left a little space for them to be able to breathe. But my cousin, she had asthma and was having a hard time breathing. So she opened up the space a little wider just as the Nazis were coming into the stable. And one of them noticed that the hay was seeping into the space. And he screamed out, "Juden raus," Jews get out. And the baby started screaming. So the Nazi came over and he opened up the whole thing, grabbed the baby, and threw this beautiful 8-month-old child into the air and caught him on the bayonet, and twirled the baby around, and they were all laughing. And my father realized that if he didn't escape at that moment, he would be killed. So he took off, and I just can't imagine having that, not being so frozen in fear, but just taking off. And he raced to the other end of the stable, and he hid in a place where they stored wheat in the storage bin. And the Nazis were, looking. They'd killed my cousin and the baby, and they were looking for him, and they were, using pitchforks to go into the hay. And my father's older brother, Menda, screamed out to him in Yiddish, "Get out now." So my father jumped out of the storage bin, and then raced the 200 feet or so to the back of the stable, jumped over a fence, and then went into the outhouse. And as he submerged himself, not fully yet, into all the waste. And as soon as he heard the Nazis about to open the door to the outhouse, he fully submerged himself. They didn't see him, thank God. And he stayed there all day and into the evening when it was dark, and he felt that he could escape safely. And his mother, my father's brothers told him it's very likely that he was dead. They hadn't heard from him all day. She is just, her eyes are so red. She loved her youngest son so much, and he loved her. And my father shows up with all this human waste all over him. And my grandmother sees him and she runs over to hug and kiss him. And it was it was the most amazing thing to him that his mother didn't care how he looked like or how he smelled, which he would tell kids it was like Chanel No. 5. And he just knew what a mother's love was. And he would use these kinds of experiences that he had when he was teaching school children about, in this case, a parent's love and how precious it was, and how to go home from school every day, and kiss your parents and tell them how much you love them. He also took other risks. He took many risks. He was working in Buno, which was a sub camp, and he was slave labor with the other children from the Kovna ghetto, and they were working in a potato field, and he would steal potatoes, which can mean instant death. And he was assigned by the Nazi guard to stay at the gate when everybody was leaving and make sure nobody had food with them. And he just didn't look and encourage people to take food with them. And he got caught one time, and they called the commandant down and others, and the commandant pulled out his gun and cocked it, and my father said, "This is the end of my life." And the Nazi laughed and said, "I like you, just don't do it again." But he made sure that other people had food to help them survive. So despite all this inhumanity and evil, my father never hated the Germans, which was shocking to me. I mean, I remember being 10 years old and screaming at him, like, how could you not hate these evil people? But he didn't, because he saw their humanity, those that tried to save his life and his family's life. But he never forgot what it was like to not have the most basic necessities for survival, and never forgot what it was like for people to hate. And because of that, my father never passed a homeless person without giving them money or food. In his home repair business, which he worked really hard on, it was his second job. If he felt that somebody didn't have the money to pay him, he didn't ask for money. He said, "I could never take off food off somebody else's table. If they're giving me money, would mean that they couldn't eat what their family needed to, because that couldn't happen." He never passed up an opportunity to be pleasant to strangers. And as a kid, I was embarrassed by this. But as an adult, I found myself doing the same thing, because I've learned from my father's example. We'd be in the supermarket and he'd see somebody and he goes, "You have a beautiful smile." And the person would just exude this, like, somebody saw me, somebody recognized me, somebody found my humanity. And it was incredible. I mean, he was such an incredible man. And he stood up to bullies because he felt that Hitler was the world's biggest bully. And if you didn't stand up to bullies, then bullies are going to win. And an example of that was, I guess I was about 10 years old, and I was in the house with my mom, and my sister was outside with my father, and she was helping him wash his truck. And this boy, I normally don't say race, but in this case it's important, this Black kid, maybe my age, comes running on our block and says, Mr., please save me. They're trying to kill me." So my father, hid him in the well of our basement. And this mob of like 6 or 7 really angry Italian kids were infuriated that a Black kid dare come into the neighborhood. And they're screaming at my father, "Where is he? We want him. You turn him over to us." And I'm in the house. I'm trembling. And my father's like, "I'm not turning anybody over to you." He goes, "I survived Hitler, and he was the world's biggest bully. You think I'm going to really, let you bully me to do this? And they're screaming and yelling, and they're threatening to burn our house down. And, he stood his ground, and the kids left, and he brought the kid into our house. My mom fed him. My dad gave him $5, which is a lot of money back then, and then took him, outside the neighborhood where he'd be safe. So, I learned such important lessons from my father about kindness, about standing one's ground, about love, about so much more. My father never talked about his experiences. My mother didn't talk about hers either. And he didn't talk to me until I was 44 years old. But he got a new lease on life. He said, I now understand the reason God saved me. When he decided to start telling his story, not willingly. He had a stepdaughter who was begging him for months to tell his story, and he finally said that he would try. And he started speaking to middle school kids and high school kids and to adults. And my shy father, who was always embarrassed about his accent, became this powerful speaker. It was amazing. You can hear a pin drop when he was talking to kids. And he wanted people to understand, how he survived and why he had hope, and why treating others with respect and kindness, fighting back against bullies, which was a big issue in some of the schools, parents' love, all these things he tied into his life surviving the Holocaust. There are so many times when he was stopped on the street by kids who had grown up and seen him and said, the impact you had on my life is still with me. So our parents, those of them who can tell it, or us who can tell their stories, these are really important lessons about hope. And as Dr. Daniele, talked about a little of my biography, it led to my career. But it also led to my appreciation of world history, because I went to the library and learned what my parents wouldn't teach me. But also, we had the New York Times in my house, which was something I never really understood until recently. Like, how did this working class family have the New York Times? It's because of a neighbor who went to work every day in a suit, and he had the New York Times, so we had to have the New York Times. And I started reading it when I was 11. And I started learning about the world, about international affairs. And then every Shabbos, every Sabbath, my father and my uncle, my mother and my uncle would argue these very fevered political conversations about world affairs and what was going on. And I learned to really care about it even more deeply. And my mother, her idols were ML King Jr. and also John F. Kennedy. And so they were both about hope, and that was imbued in me too. But they also argued about Richard Nixon and about his dirty tricks. And I learned about how people who have responsibility, people who are in responsible positions could be corrupt, and it's about good people to fight back against that. So my upbringing taught me about the power of people to affect change through voting and activism. That's why, even though anti-Semitism is exploding in Europe and in recent years around the US, I still have hope. I know that staying silent and hoping for the best will only escalate hatred, that bullies fear strength, and that there are more good people in this world than there are evil people. This is the time for Jews and those of other religions to band together and stand up against hatred and cruelty and violence and evil. And I know we can make a difference. What will you do?
I'm sure we will explore that question further during the dialogue. Tad, all the way from Queens.
Sure.
The screen is yours.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ms. Luria. That was quite moving, very powerful. So I guess I'll start by saying that finishing this book while my father is still alive and having it published, it's like having a thorn pulled out of my anxious second generation soul. The obligation to carry our history forward was actually fulfilled. So thanks to Robert Mandel and Frederick Price, and thank you, Yael, for allowing us all to share these stories. So I grew up knowing that my father was a Holocaust survivor and that he fought in Israel's War of Independence. I kind of knew the headlines, but he never really shared any of the details. It took years, but his wall of silence finally cracked. I was 19, home from college after just completing a course on the Holocaust. It was Father's Day, and I managed to ask him a question that I had avoided most of my life, which is, who are you, Dad? And what's your survivor story? He immediately called me a putz and left the room. Okay, at least I tried. But soon he returned carrying a tattered document, and on the cover was a swastika, and inside was a photo of his 12-year-old face, but not his real name, which is David Yamenstein. Instead, it said Tadros Lipsky, which is a Christian name. Turns out it was his false identity papers, and that played a very big part in his survival. The document was also the introduction to other parts of his story that he really kept close, sealed for so long. And I think that was mainly to shield us from his traumatic experiences. So finally, some of the details merged, and here is the highlight film. 12 years old, he's arrested by the Gestapo for smuggling medicine into the Warsaw Ghetto so that his father, a physician, could keep treating patients until the day he died. His father is murdered in Treblinka, his mother shot to death in a hospital by German soldiers. But thanks to his false identity papers, my father gets sent to Germany as a slave laborer, where he's viciously abused for more than 2 years. Eventually, my father is liberated by a Russian soldier who puts him on top of a train. So think Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible. And he makes his way back to Warsaw, only to learn that his family is wiped out. Soon after that tragic discovery, he gets recruited by the Zionists. Orphans make fierce soldiers. And then he goes to Israel, where he nearly dies multiple times fighting for independence. He leaves Israel, he lands in New York, he gets married, and then, as he'd say, so much stuff here you could fill a book. However, as important as most of those books are, my father did not want a traditional Holocaust memoir. Early on, he gave me an editorial note that, no writer can forget. He said, it's okay if people cry reading my story, but you better make them laugh too. And that kind of shaped everything, the tone, the format, even the title. I'm an advertising creative director. My job is to cut through the resistance. So I approached the book as a branding problem. How do we get more people to stop, to listen, to connect, and most importantly, to share? How do we break through to jaded readers who think, I already know this story? The answer wasn't to dilute history. It was to reframe it so that the horrors could get past people's defenses. In other words, use humor as a Trojan horse. In addition to the humor, the book's structure breaks a few forms of the genre as well. For example, much of it unfolds as a stage play, which is set in a Chinese restaurant, the place where my father's most shocking revelations surfaced. Like the scandalous story of how he lost his virginity. I won't share it here. Or how he opened a pharmacy in Manhattan with a $50,000 loan from a madam who ran the brothel next door. I also learned about his daring missions in Israel, most of which are redacted in the book because I don't want the Mossad coming knocking at my door. And it's all delivered with biting humor and absurd banter that typically swirls between my father and his two sons. And then around that core stylistic element runs a fast-paced narrative and reportage that switches between the past and the present. It pivots between his trauma to mine. And then I also break the fourth wall, giving readers an up-close look at my neuroses and insecurities. Another device I include are doctor's notes from Mount Sinai's inherited trauma research team. And I use them as permission slips to justify some of my unquestionable life choices throughout the years. And that's where the title comes from. Their research concluded that trauma migrates to the next generation, and it can manifest in dysfunctional relationships, substance abuse, and self-sabotage. It's pretty dark stuff, which I intentionally lighten with humor in places you least expect, and often just when it's needed most. I think one of the biggest challenges was balancing reverence with irreverence. How do you tell the grimmest story in history without smothering the humor that my father was demanding? In our family, humor isn't disrespect. It's a kind of survival strategy and a coping mechanism, and it's what keeps my father going. I think it helped him survive. So the book had to be a true reflection of our authentic personalities. My father is blunt. He is sometimes wildly inappropriate, even when describing the hardest parts of his past. And frankly, this father-son Holocaust duo, we didn't live a spotless PG-13 life. So why would the story be told that way? And sure, there's going to be some readers who will find some of the sexual content and the raw language offensive. And that's not ideal, but I'd rather be brutally honest than comfort readers by softening the blows. And I don't know if he's on this call, but I have to credit Fred Price, one of the publishers, for keeping me on that track. Using a boxing analogy, he told me, okay, you set it up and hit him with a left uppercut, another uppercut, jab, jab, and then you finish it off with a roundhouse right to the gut, which takes me to the absolute gut punch of the book. When I bring my father to Treblinka, the site of his father's murder. Was I worried how he might react being there? Yes, absolutely. However, my father has this kind of survivor superpower, and it's called resilience. The guy can plunge into grief, and then seconds later, just before he crashes, he jetpacks up to the surface, and I'll say something like, hey, any of you putzes want to grab a bite to eat? He never loses that sense of humor. He never loses his spirit. Researching and writing the Treblinka chapters, it broke me, especially knowing that this is where my father would have been sent if it wasn't for his false identity papers. And it also clarified my purpose. I wanted readers to look into the abyss, but also shine a light on Jewish resistance, specifically the Treblinka uprising. It's this defiant chapter of the fighting Jewish spirit that I think too many historians gloss over. It was a powerful moment. And being there, yeah, it was really difficult to write the scenes, to chronicle the overwhelming grief we were all feeling being in that place. But ultimately, it was a second generation mission accomplished, because in that hell called Treblinka, my father had the chance to say farewell to his father and recite the Kaddish in the place where his family perished. And now, on a lighter note, I am excited to see what the third generation will create and how they'll carry the message and lessons forward. And with that, I hand it off to Inbal Shlomi, Gen 3.
Thank you, Tom. Indeed, Inbal, the screen is all yours. Third generation, mother of two.
Okay, thank you, El, for the invitation and for everything else you offer me. So, my grandmother, Hannah Shlomi, whom Dr. Yael Danieli knew well, was for me the strongest woman in the world. During the war, she lost her mother and 4 of her siblings. Her oldest sister fled to Siberia with her husband and baby. She survived but lost her sanity. When she immigrated to Israel, her children were placed in boarding school, and she herself was hospitalized in a psychiatric institution. My grandmother was sent to Auschwitz under a borrowed identity as a Polish communist woman. She endured the death march and chose life at its end. She immigrated to Israel and rushed forward. She never spoke about the Holocaust. In my grandparents' home, there was no Yiddish or Polish, but also no emotional language. They spoke the language of Zionism and revival, not the language of pain and feelings. So how did the role of speaking land with me? So this is a question I still cannot fully answer. As a child, I read everything I could about the Holocaust, especially books that my parents told me were not for my age. At 16, I joined my school's delegation to Poland. When I returned, I felt I knew too much. I was only 16, but I believed I had understood enough about humanity and about the evil inside us all. And with that, I shut the door on the Holocaust. I stopped reading or watching anything about it. In a way, I rebelled against my family role. In fact, in a striking echo, my eldest daughter, the 4th generation, when she was only in kindergarten, asked not to participate in Holocaust Remembrance Day ceremonies. So, I had no intention of writing a novel about the Holocaust, not at all. I am a psychiatrist working with trauma. I intended to write a fiction novel about family, madness, and trauma. The psychoanalyst Philip Bromberg writes that a dream is an encounter with different parts of the self. Each character in the dream representing a different fragment of one's personality. Mm-hmm. Writing can be seen in the same way, as an encounter with multiple parts of the self. I came to understand I had, unconsciously, written the family fragments, the different ways my family coped psychologically with Holocaust trauma, psychosis, dissociation, emotional detachment, silence, and running away. In my book, Everything Belongs to Nobody, Mina is a Holocaust survivor. She is a woman who has learned to survive through her femininity, her manipulation, and her hard work. Neither the readers nor her daughters know much about her wartime experience. Only that, as a child in the ghetto, she lost her beloved mother, Rochele. Mina immigrates to Israel alone and eventually loses her mind, moving in and out of psychiatric hospitalization. Her eldest daughter, Michal, responds to the family trauma with dissociation. She hardly speaks and gets lost frequently. Only in her dreams do we see the footsteps of trauma. Nechama, the second daughter, is born a twin. Her twin sister is stillborn, and Nechama holds on to her for several days, refusing to let go. This traumatic event becomes a symbol of absence. Nechama writes to her twin sister in Sisyphean effort to comprehend herself and her family. I would like to read you a short translated piece from my book. I could have, like my mother, heard my grandmother's voice, but then they would have taken me to a psychiatric hospital. I could have, like Michal, run away and never speak. Instead, circumstances pushed me to write. We can be glad they didn't push me somewhere worse. I began writing the novel at the end of COVID and finished it during the war. One of the strongest memories from the COVID lockdown was the collective anxiety in Israel around food. Even though the news kept repeating there was no reason to fear, the supermarkets were flooded and then emptied. I will dare to share an even harder moment. On the night we heard about the Israeli strike in Iran, I found myself standing in the kitchen cooking pasta. My husband looked at me with worry, but I simply couldn't stop. So although I've never experienced hunger, the fear of hunger, which was never spoken in my family, took over me. Professor Yolanda Gempel writes that trauma has radioactive qualities. Silent, invisible, and without distinction, it poisons everything around it. In the same way, in my book, trauma is not spoken openly. It is acted. It sits in between lines. Like a single organism with multiple heads, trauma circulates between the women of the family. Like a poisonous infusion, it penetrates from Grandma Rochele's story to Mina madness, to Nechama dangerous behavior, and to Michal's dream. I cannot finish without saying a few words about the war. After 2 horrible years, I look back at my grandmother and forward to my children, and I am flooded with concern. 80 years after the Holocaust, here we are, still writing its imprints upon us. Do decision makers in the Middle East grasp the war shockwaves? Not just the direct and horrifying consequences on both the Israeli and the Palestinian side, the murdered civilians, the fallen soldier, the wounded, and of course the kidnapped. I urge us to use what we have learned about the intergenerational impact of trauma to truly grasp the scale of disaster that Israel and the Middle East are facing. And yet, I choose to end on a note of optimism, because human beings also possess remarkable capacities of resilience and repair. At my grandmother's 90th birthday party, she said she had lived a good life. When asked about the Holocaust, she replied she would not allow a few years to destroy her entire life. I will give you a small spoiler. My book ends with what we call in Hebrew, Chatzi Nechama, half consolation or cold comfort. Nechama, who spends her whole life searching for answers, and Michal, who spends her life running away, finally managed to meet and share a close moment of processing together. Was it all Nechama ever hoped for? No. But as the Yiddish saying goes, which also gave my book its title, everything belongs to nobody.
This is a moment of frustration where I want to hug you.
And sending you a hug back.
And while we have bless God, we have the virtual world where we can hug each other virtually. It's not quite the same. Thank you, brilliant authors and wonderful human beings. I so be that you were tearing a bit, so was I, and we have to help Inbal, of course, publish a book in English. we know the two publishers we mentioned, and I already wrote to one of them, but maybe B, you can also connect us to Pegasus. And I'm sure that for this dialogue among you, I saw you take some notes, literally or just in your minds. Please, the floor is all of yours. You can unmute, and I wonder if you have comments, questions to each other, some ideas that floated while each other spoke. Go ahead, please. You can go in any order you want. So who would like to start?
I'll say something.
Please.
I was really, I feel the people in this webinar who have spoken are like brothers and sisters to me, that we've gone through so much of the same things together, and that we came out of this and feeling stronger for having taken this journey. I was very impressed with the messages that we received from our parents, not to hate Germans. That's very specific, something Marty's parents and my parents always said, don't hate the German, not all Germans were bad. My daughter, she wanted to take Yiddish in high school here in Ridgefield, but they didn't have it here in New England, so she took German. And there was a student exchange, her town and the town in Germany, Uberlingen, and our town of Ridgefield. And a young high school student came from Uberlingen, and the first time we met her was at the Shabbat table. And it also happened to be the yahrzeit of my father. So there was a candle in his memory there, and this German girl came to be with us for Shabbat. And I remembered at that time, I was thinking about how the one time I was with my father when we had a stopover in Frankfurt, Germany on the way to Israel, the only time he ever made it to Israel. And at the airport, when I heard the voices of the German guards, it irritated me. I said, those damn Germans. And my father, who was in Auschwitz and lost most of his family and his health and almost everything, said, Aron, not all Germans were bad. And that's what I was thinking at that Shabbat table. And that was the message that he conveyed. And it was those kind of messages against hate that's how I was brought up. That's how Marty was brought up. And I think my fellow panelists were brought up to some degree, to find the humor, to find the humanity in everybody. And I must say, I was so happy to hear this from everybody on the panel. And it's a very important message for the world right now. And that's how we deal with hate. Thank you all.
Well put.
We started in the same order. Marty, you might as well unmute and share your own thoughts and questions to others.
Yeah, so what struck me, one of the things that struck me is that we're all pretty articulate in describing our life paths and the impact of our parents and what they went through on us. But I think it's important to emphasize that it's not handled. This is not dealing with trauma is not there's no finish line to it. So, B, your story about the baby. It's a raw nerve. And I continue to experience those pokes at my nervous system, literally. And I think that's the experience that people have with trauma, and certainly the experience with detail of the trauma so close to us. So one of the things that Aron and I learned is you can't outrun it. It's never going to go away. I teach for many years now. I teach yoga to a veterans program, veterans with PTSD. And sometimes I kind of go outside the lines and I overstep my pay grade. And I introduce this. And it's important because there's this point of invalidation. I've experienced it for so long. And during the course of writing the book, I finally reconciled that the invalidation is something like, I'm still upset by this. When am I going to get over this? And it's not a point of getting over it. It's a point of acknowledging it, and the more altitude I can get from it, it's a validation of my humanity, my compassion. And that was a big success of what our parents also conveyed to us. Not only the said and the unsaid, not only the energy and the suck of the suffering, but also that whether it be not all Germans were bad or whatever it is, but more so to the personal experience, how we feel it. So one part of the book I talk about me being a mushy man. And, you know, it's so, from being a street, Queens was a nice place, Todd. The Bronx was a little, so there's a certain hardness and resilience and eyes in the back of your head that you kind of accompanied growing up and making it out of the Bronx.
You win, Bronx, you win. You win now.
So that notwithstanding, and my experience in war and all that, it bothered me that I was still reactivated. And I managed it to the point of a short burst of tears allowed that pressure to release. And then I was um, centered again. But I think people deal with trauma, they don't have the breadth of that context to allow for it, to associate it not only with something bad or not only something they're carrying or something they have to contend with, but also that important validation that absent the heartfulness, even absent the Menschlichkeit, you know, the decency of at the core of being a compassionate human being, that is a sensitive area. You know, the story notwithstanding, the history notwithstanding, it is a sensitive area. And one of the breakthroughs that both Aron and I discovered is Aron, you know, delved into this for decades, and I avoided it for decades. And once we could both embrace it with the commitment to having it be empowering, didn't know how, but we knew we had to do it. And we didn't do it until we did do it. And I think we all share that because it takes something to, one, distinguish that, experience it, and actually put it into existence in an art form. That was a big deal. And I think, you know, not having read the other books yet, but I think that seems to be a common thread. Embracing trauma as an empowering process, as a badge of honor. It's not quite the right way to articulate it, but as a badge of a validation of compassion and humanity, rather than just the burden.
perhaps culture has something to do with it too, about a man having to be mushy in order to cry,
Oh, of course.
etc., or a woman has to be aggressive in order to raise her voice or to scream, or so.
Yes, but again, B, to the story, I'm sure we all have stories.
And perhaps also one of the things I was struck with when I was reading these books was actually, yeah, your center is, of course, in the same history, but how your contexts of growing up are so uniquely different. And your ways of expressing yourselves are very unique. So this is an interesting, fascinating complexity to read these 4 unique books. So to use what you said, perhaps when you embrace and grow and transcend, each one has a different voice, which is very exciting. So,
And what was required was crossing that line, getting your father to participate in a history and into you're writing the book, Todd, and everybody's parents, and held different entry points, but I think we all share the. Well, let me say it like this: one time I went to a group of Holocaust children of Holocaust survivors here in Atlanta, close to 40 years ago. And it only took me one visit to realize I was not interested in commiserating. I had not me. I was not a candidate for that. And I think what we all have done, with however we navigated to here, or to the point of writing our books, it was not about commiseration. It was not about woe is me. It was not about who's got. I don't know if anybody remembers. There used to be a show, Queen for a Day, in the 50s, and it was who had the biggest sob story, and the audience voted, and it was terrible. I was not a party to that. I would not. I did not. Had no appetite for that. What we have done is not that. It had a purpose. There was a commitment, a senior commitment to making a difference for ourselves individually and making a difference for people who would we'd be able to share the stories with.
you see, go ahead, Todd.
No, I just wanted to add to that. We each process our family's history and trauma in our own unique ways, I think, as we're seeing in this session. And to your point, yeah, and you don't want to necessarily be part of that, that group that can't let it go, because for some it's just this incredible burden, and then for others it's kind of like you were saying, a badge of honor in a way to be a 2nd generation Holocaust survivor. And then some of us, and I'm kind of guilty of this, are like, vegans or protein proselytizers who just can't shut up about it. I mean, I'll find myself any chance to talk about the H word, and I'm there. But that's not how all of us process our experiences.
I want to, I think I'm doing what I do best sometimes when it relates to the Holocaust, is avoidance. So I'm going to move us away from, because I can have a very deep conversation, and we could later, about all the impact the Holocaust has had on my life and my sister and my brother and my 2 uncles. It's it's unbelievable. But I want to talk about something that's been that I thought about this morning, that relates to the rise in anti-Semitism, the denial of the Holocaust. And I was thinking back when I went with a group of survivors and family members. And one of the camps that we went to was Mauthausen, which was terrifying because it was left, except for the prisoners, it was left the way that it was. So with the guard towers around it and the ovens, which were ready to fire up in 15 minutes still. And in the entryway to where the ovens were, there were these like bullet holes, in the concrete walls. And the woman who was our guide, who was graduate assistant, had been for Elie Wiesel, said those are not bullet holes. In the very early 50s, deniers came into this camp, to this incredibly holy space where so many people were murdered, and they started digging these holes and then tested them to see if there was xylem B gas. And because they couldn't find what is an inert gas, which wouldn't be there, that was their proof that the Holocaust didn't happen. So, and that was shocking to me at that time, that even that early on, the denials were going on. So it hasn't stopped. It's just become almost acceptable in certain political realms to say horrible things about survivors and about it didn't happen and about that they deserved it and they asked for it and whatever else. So my question to all of us is, what do we do to lessen the growth of anti-Semitism in this country? And how do we get it to not just stop growing, but to get a handle on it so that it's not going to not just make it terrifying for us, but also for our children. And one other little story was what happened at I forget the name of the cultural center in DC, in the museum, which I had gone to many times. This young couple was murdered. My daughter and now her husband were planning on going there the following week, and it could have been them. So these things can happen to any of us. One of our congregants moved from Pittsburgh, and she knew the people. That was her shul. It's all very close to home. So what do we do?
I think one of the things we can do, anti-Semitism doesn't exist alone. There's hatred of other people as well.
Right.
And we need coalitions of decency. We need to get together with other people who are also feeling that hatred directed against them, the violence directed against them. And we have to tell our stories. We have to hear their stories. We have to find common ground. And we need to not be silent. It's very easy to turn off the news. It's very easy to be intimidated and afraid. But if we do that, we do it at our own peril. So just one idea is I'll be speaking at churches. I'll be speaking to the broader community. And I think that we have a certain platform. That's why I said what I did at the beginning, because I think that we have a special responsibility. And if we can, Elie Wiesel, survivor, won the Nobel Peace Prize. When he won the Nobel Peace Prize, I felt like I had won it. That he's us. He's gone. It's our responsibility to be his voice, to be that moral compass. Mm-hmm. And he got it as a writer, and he got it as a survivor, and he got it as someone who was concerned about every oppressed people in the world. We have to be similarly concerned We can't expect people to care about what happened to us if we don't care about what's happening to other people. And he said that, and I agree with that. So we need all the good people. My mother, every night, she says a prayer for her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, and all the good people in the world. We need to find all the good people in the world. As one of our panelists said, you know, the forces of light are stronger than the forces of darkness. I think it was you, B. So we have to gather the forces of light to fight the forces of darkness and not let the bullies of the world, Todd, you know, as I think you mentioned, we can't let the bullies of the world get away with bullying us into silence. So that's my answer on 1 foot.
I completely agree with that. And just to add a little bit, as I often remind my own kids, their grandfather's story is both horrific and miraculous, but it's not the only one. And every culture carries its own traumas. And I feel like by uniting with them, collaborating with them, we can amplify their voices. We not only honor their histories, but it strengthens our own. We bring more attention to our own by a collaboration of other cultures who have experienced their own traumas, their own genocides, their own Holocausts. And perhaps for a future panel, we can collaborate with some of these other cultures and share our collective trauma and bring more attention to this tragic moment that's only getting worse. But I feel like a united voice will benefit everyone.
If I may share with you, this is what our center is about. We have working groups from Haiti, from Yazidi people in Kurdistan, of nuclear exposed people, of on and on. And in Rwanda, we have in our audience today people from all over the world.
I saw them coming in from all over.
Yeah. So please, you're so embraced and welcome in this, because part of what I can share is everybody first feels totally alone. It's like our people's curse. It's something is about us. And your instinct, your repairing instinct about saying you're not alone. We're all in this together. See, again, it's the hug. So you all have the real repairing instinct in you. I used to always joke when I lectured that children of survivors are therapists by the age of 3. They're just waiting for the degrees and the license. So here you are, proof.
Tikkun olam.
Absolutely. Now we do have some comments and questions. Let me share the ones from the chat. And so as you can see from the chat, people literally are from all over the world and at least 4 continents. So this is, they are already with us, right? And they're very, so for example, Harriet Jackson says, hi, I'm 2nd generation living in New York and loving everyone who's sharing their own and their parents' raw and touching stories. Thank you very much. And then another 2nd generation from Vermont, just finished my memoir with the inspiration being a survival story and having hope. And Eva Rossi is thanking you in Baldia. I connected with your story. I felt as if I were an outside observer as so many secrets were kept. I will not go on, but I was forced to take on what was left undone and never knew it would never end. Resilience is certainly passed on, and believing that light pushes away a lot of darkness indeed. And from Munich, Germany, we have a second generation here is experiencing almost a deja vu. It's saying Dina Zenker. And these were just second generation or third related to Holocaust. But I want to attend to, just a second. Let me go to the questions. We have 3 of them. Actually, we have only 2 real questions. One is, can any of you correlate the Holocaust and the pogroms, especially when it comes to intergenerational trauma? Anybody has thoughts about that? I'm sure you have. Go ahead, Aron.
Well, my wife, Judy, she grew up with the story of her grandmother living through a pogrom in Ukraine. The story goes that some Cossacks came to their home and they wanted to rape her mother. The girls, the daughters, were all hiding under the bed, but it turned out that one of the Cossacks was actually the father, who looked just like the Tsar. And he said, what do we need these people? Let's go drink, and he ushered them out of the house. This story my wife grew up with. And of course, she had tremendous understanding of where I came from, because she had a similar experience. In her, although her parents were not in the Holocaust, they're Canadians, they were in Canada, but the pogroms affected the rest of the family, and that's why they came to Canada. When October 7th happened, to me, it was a pogrom. I mean, that's how I related to it. So I think, the line between a pogrom and the Holocaust is not that. I mean, to degree that what happened in the Holocaust was to the degree of many pogroms put together, but based in the same idea of hatred and prejudice. So, I mean, that's my off-the-cuff take on pogroms.
Anyone else wants to respond to this particular question?
I want to respond to what Aron said. Like, I have some thoughts about trauma. It's like something that comes in layers, and I will try to explain what I mean. Like, children of trauma survivors are more vulnerable and at high risk for experiencing trauma themselves. As a result, I often observe that I call layers of trauma in my patient, like 3rd generation of Holocaust survival, children of veterans with PTSD, children of survivor of sexual abuse, and so on. So it makes everything more complex. And when we talk about the war, for example, like Aron said, it is perceived differently by Holocaust survivor or by those who have experienced war-related trauma or by survivor of sexual abuse. So I think the interpretation as the experience of trauma is really connected to our past and to our family trauma and past trauma. So it's like you said about the experience of the war now. It's like our trauma makes it different. Like we experience very differently from people who had other traumas or no trauma.
Okay, we have another question. How can I, Rabbi, this question is for you. How can I put my video picture for me to be seen? It says anonymous attendee, so I can't tell you who it is.
Yeah, I can't tell since it has anonymous on it. They would have to put their name in the chat, and I would have to make them a panelist, and then they can come on as video.
Okay, so maybe you can do it for Judy Renee, because your question is really not a question, and I'm a little humble to read it out myself. Judy Renee, here she is. It's Renee, R-O, but that's okay. Judy, are you still here? Judy? She says yes, but not on audio or video. You are on audio, actually, Judy. Rabbi, would you please help?
I think
Yes,
she's
yes.
explaining she's not
Okay.
available.
Judy, oh, sorry, please read. What's going on? Oh, she's at work and unable to speak. Yeah, these webinars put people in interesting positions. So I will read what she says. This is Judy Renee sending you hugs, dear Yael. Fascinating as always. Your work lives with these creative and informed panelists. I'm a teacher and photographer. I work as director of Zachor Anti-Semitism Initiative for Jewish Federation in Orange, Orange County, New York. I teach about my parents' experiences as survivors of the Shoah and address incidences of anti-Semitism locally. I've written a thesis on children of Holocaust survivors, but I'm not able to move forward with publication as I truly feel that my parents and their generation of survivors should always take precedence. And now the horrors of October 7th and the war have obsessed and distracted me. So I need to hear more from these strong writers and how to move forward in gratitude. So please, strong writers, I believe in not only Judy, I think you can really repair and help others. Go ahead. What enabled you finally to dare to take a page and put your words on a page, not just to share with others privately? May I ask that of each of you, please?
So in my
Hey,
case,
go ahead. Go ahead.
in my case, it's because my father asked me to.
Ah,
And I can't begin to explain to you how deep that pit in my stomach was. And my father asked me to do this because I, like Marty, spent a good part of my life, most of my life, kind of avoiding dealing with the Holocaust because it was a taboo subject in our family, and and school, the way in yeshiva, the way it was treated was just horrible. And so I just didn't want anything to do with it. And I felt guilty about it. But my father kept on asking me, and I knew that I needed to write this story. So I started. And I, was kind of lost in all the detail. I got into chapter 3 and started writing the story about my cousin who was murdered by the Nazis. And it's taken me forever to tell that story because it's like, how is it possible that anybody can be so inhumane and people laugh? I mean, it's so hard to imagine. So I stopped. I just couldn't write it. I just couldn't let those words come out of my fingertips. And it was 5 years later, and my father's still asking me about the book. And then he's getting dementia and he's not asking as much. And my father came to speak to from the Jewish Federation in Chattanooga for Yom HaShoah. And I guess he didn't have dementia then. And he just gave an incredibly powerful presentation. And the woman who had organized it, who had founded the Georgia Holocaust Commission and was internationally known, Sylvia Wygoda, blessed memory, came up to me and said, "You have to write your father's story." And I was like, "I've tried, I can't." And I said, "Can you find somebody who can write it for me?" That's how I ended up with my co-author. And he was supposed to write the whole book. And he went through a big process to make sure he wanted to do this. About a year and change later, he's finished all the history, of how all these cities and towns, what the history was behind them, which was very important and rarely told. And he called me and he said, "B, I don't know how to write your father's story. You're going to have to write it." And I'm like, "Oh my God," I can't get rid of this responsibility. So it took me another 5 years, and I finally decided I had to be really depressed when I write this. So when the pandemic happened and I had to close my business, I figured that's a good time. And I finished it. And then I was so afraid that nobody would ever publish it that it took me a year to get it to the person who said he would bring it to his publisher, Pegasus Books. So it was a 13-year journey.
Well, I've been married for 41 years.
Oh, me too.
For the first 30.
You will get some other details similar. Go ahead.
Extraordinary wife has, in technical terms, Hakma Chainik, urged me to write a story. And I was never going to go to Poland. I was never going to visit a concentration camp. I was never going to visit where my parents were from. Then I read a book called The Dude and the Zen Master. It was by Jeff Bridges and Bernie Glassman. Jeff Bridges is, of course, the actor who portrayed the dude in The Big Lebowski, and Bernie Glassman, the founder of the Zen Peacemakers. And Bernie, in the book, describes his organization, and for the past 20 years, every year, approximately, he took a group of people to Auschwitz-Birkenau for a immersion retreat. And he described the context of the retreat. It was based on 3 tenets of Zen Buddhism. One is to come from not knowing. One is to bear witness. And the third is to take loving action. So I read about bearing witness. And it was in that moment, I knew I was going to go do this. And it was bearing witness being an intentional, responsibility-driven action, not a visit, but having a purpose. And I knew in that instant that I was going to go do that, and I did in November 2017. And it was a profound experience for me. Not only that I actually went, but 5 days in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And I returned, I took notes, and I started a kind of a diary. And I got back and talked to Aron some. I had invited him, maybe you want to go? And he said, no, he'd been to Auschwitz 3 times before. I came back And I wrote an article that Aron published in Reform Judaism magazine. And I said, hey, I think I want to write more about this. You know, that was his career. And he said, he suggests, why don't we do it together? And at that instant, I knew this was not only the thing to do, but would also be the perfect person to do it with. So we collaborated, and it took us about 6 years to begin and to go through the whole process of completing this book. Absent that prompt, absent that, and I refer to it as the creation of a context. Without a context, it would have been a visit. It would have been a just reactivation, stick a finger in a light socket. It would have been not for me. But with a sufficient context, that was the turning point. That was the stimulus that allowed me to begin the process.
I think my writing journey is close to yours, but with different language. For me, it started with that kind of relentless second generation duty to family, to Judaism, to the future, the sense of obligation to preserve a parent's story in a relatable way, in an accessible and approachable way, to push back against rising anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, and do a part to keep Holocaust awareness alive. And also, Jewish guilt is rather persuasive, and there are only so many times you can hear your father say, "Hey, Putz, when are you going to write my story? I'm not getting any younger over here. I'd like to see it while I'm still alive." My father will be 95. And again, that sense of obligation, he's one of the last living Holocaust survivors. He's a rare bird. And I felt his story should be told. And like many others, it's shocking and it's heartbreaking. But I wanted it to get out there because so many people are trying to deny or diminish or erase our history, and they're pretty successful at it. And I felt like we can't let this happen. And it's not just us, their genocides are happening all around the world. And maybe it sounds kind of naive, but I felt sharing one more personal account, but in this case, a rather unconventional way to do it, to hopefully draw in more readers. It might help refocus people's attention on the worst examples of cruelty and inhumanity, past and present.
So I think my story is a bit different because I've always written. Maybe I was 18 when I start writing, and it was like a big thing for me. I believe in many ways, writing is a healing process. Like me, the three characters in my book, each write in her own way. And I think after starting working with trauma, I started writing even more. I believe it was for me a coping mechanism to deal with the overwhelming things I hear every day and what they're doing to me and to my soul. And I feel that writing a story provides a sense of control and allow us to process, which is so important in trauma, our own trauma or dealing with other people's trauma. And the question for me was if to publish or not. This was the main issue. And I think that with age, you understand life will not last forever, and you have to choose. And I suddenly had the courage to do so, and I'm very happy I did that. It was important for me.
I've been writing about the Holocaust for decades. But until I worked on this book, I didn't even realize that I had never spoken to my father about the Holocaust, ever. I couldn't believe it when I realized that. During all those years of writing about the Holocaust, writing about the Romanian Holocaust, even though my parents are from Poland, editing many memoirs at a time when publishers were not interested in Holocaust memoirs at all. But doing this project made me realize how little I knew, and also for 50 years, I had the most important resource at my fingertips, sitting on my bookshelf collecting dust. In 1968, the only surviving member of my father's family, beside my father, was living in Argentina. He wrote a memoir in Spanish under a pseudonym, Alberto Man. And he gave me his memoir and said, I'd like you to translate it. That was 1968. And and I told him I would, but I didn't. And I really now question, why did I sit on this for so long when I'm so interested in the Holocaust and writing about other experiences? And I realized I wanted to know, but I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know about my own family because probably the pain would be too great. So it's only when we started working on this book that I asked my uncle's grandson in Buenos Aires to translate the book, and he did. And that's when I found out things that happened to my family in their town, in Będzin, Poland, after the occupation, what happened there. And the stories are absolutely amazing. Things of heroic stories, all kinds of things. When the family arrived at Auschwitz, he was there. The last time he saw his parents, my grandparents that I never met. So suddenly I got this huge dose of family history from a source that was always there. My mother is 105, lives in Los Angeles, and has been waiting for this book for a long time because it's her story. It's as much her story as my story, and she really wanted it told. She would speak at Hillel in various places when she could. So it was part of our family tradition, her tradition, to tell people about what happened. My sister also urged me for years to write a memoir, but it never seemed to be the right time until around the time I was going to be retiring from the Reform movement as the editor there. And I thought this might be a really good transition from working full-time as an editor to having a project in the wings, so to speak. And it was just at that time, Marty and I had not seen each other in 40 years. We've been friends for 60 years. And we were so close. But, some event, unexpected event, my daughter and her husband and their toddler son were flying from LA to New York with a stopover in Atlanta. And there was a storm and they got stuck. It was Christmas Eve. They got stuck there. My daughter called me and said, Dad, we're stuck. What should we do? I said, I have a friend in Atlanta, Marty. Give him a call. And Marty rescued them and everything. And they had a wonderful time. And then the next day, my daughter called me and said, I don't understand why you and Marty never get together. I mean, the atmosphere of your home, they're exactly alike. You guys are like brothers. And after that, we did get together. And after that, when Marty explained unfolded, we started talking about growing up, we never talked about the Holocaust. We knew that we only learned that both our fathers were in Auschwitz, both our mothers were in the same concentration camps, Gross Rosen system, and that we were conceived in the same DP camp. We only learned that when we started working on the book later. So it just shows you how little you might know. and what your motivation is for finally deciding that you want to know. So, from my side, that's kind of how they came together.
So there are many different ways, and it takes time. This is a very important lesson for those of you who think that if you don't produce it immediately, something is wrong. It takes time. So Dania Greenberg asked me, is there a way to get the names of the publishers? And I answered her personally, but let me repeat. It is Jessica Case at Pegasus. And it is Robert Mandel at Mandel Villar Press. Okay. Now, so Gila Schnitz, Schnitzler asked, how can I stay centered and keep my voice when I feel excluded or silenced by well-meaning colleagues who seem uncomfortable collaborating with someone who is Jewish or Israeli? Okay. She definitely needs your advice.
I would like to know more about the situation to be able to answer the question.
Okay.
And I'm also looking for Jessica Case's email, which will make it easier for folks.
Oh, that's amazing.
Here's
You can put it in the chat. That's really helpful. Thank you.
welcome.
Okay. So anybody has a suggestion to Gila about staying focused? So maybe one suggestion could be that it's okay not to be focused all the time, to give yourself the space to roam, to cry a little maybe if you feel lonely about that, and to seek support from those who do support you, right? Because, people, the panelists spoke about being supportive of each other in the process. But you can write to us. We're good for it. Okay, it is someone from Croatia too. And let me continue. Marty, Judy is thanking you. I visited Auschwitz with my mom. Cannot imagine spending days there. I can see collaboration to be crucial. Absolutely. And in Bal, my own daughter, third generation, became a therapist as well. Yes, I agree that with age, it becomes more important to tell our story. And Jean Sarshon is writing, I have visited 3 concentration camps to honor that we all bear witness to truth-telling. One trip was to visit to the camp for women in Ravensbrück as a child of mother who left a violent spouse. And in effort to provide for us, it was a Jewish man who cared and offered her support. I never forgot him. And let me continue. Eva Rossi is writing, UB, my deepest apologies on behalf of Italians. Those people are by no means representative of who we are. Many Italians turned against Mussolini after he started his manifesto on race purity. Even today, most of the protests are second-generation Arabs born from Italy who fuel with hateful anti-Semitism. And Judy Ronay, thanks you, Aron, for the historical perspective. Many children of survivors feel like siblings. You all honor your parents, grandparents, and all survivors. And Hira Jackson writes, Aron, a friend, Rick Feldman in Riverdale, mother, is also from Benin. Rick organized a panel discussion and exhibit devoted to Benin at a local shul. Rick probably has materials relevant to your mother, and she gives the telephone. So please, you write to me. Oh no, you're getting the same, right? So please, this is wonderful. Okay. Gila, you can write to me. I would put my email. And I would, here, it's there. And I can forward it to others. Okay, I don't want people to be left. Okay, so Harry Jackson, again, to be. You just referenced how the yeshiva treated the subject of the Holocaust. How did the teachers treat the Shoah? Please describe your experience. B, I'm also trying to write my father's story and feel that proverbial pit in my stomach that you courageously described. Thank you, B, for sharing the dread you felt before and during the research and writing. I'm immersed in that dread. God bless you and your honesty and courage. Harriet, go ahead, B.
Just push through. It's worth it. So Yeshiva Flatbush, where I went in Brooklyn, their way of dealing with the Holocaust was to lock the doors of the auditorium, not allow anybody to leave, and show Holocaust films. And I remember Night and Fog, which is horrifying.
Yes, of course.
And others. And, I said to them, I'm the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. This is very traumatic for me. And they wouldn't let me leave. It was like just so cruel. I just, they just felt that it was their responsibility to teach us by force feeding us. There was no conversation after these films. We were just told to go back to class. So it was very, very, very painful. And I just could not believe that they did that to us. I also just wanted to make another note. When I went to my high school's 25th reunion, one of the people who was in yeshiva with me in elementary school said to me, did you know that all of the kids in our class were children of Holocaust survivors? And I looked at him because nobody talked about it. I had no idea. None of us had any idea. It was just something you just didn't talk about it. And that to me was so shocking. Kids talk about their experiences, but it was just a cone of silence.
You're reminding me of my own generation in Israel. Being older than Israel, we didn't realize also until 70 years later that many of our classmates were themselves child survivors. And it took us then 2 years to write everybody's memories and come up with the class book about that. So, and interesting, of course, I wrote about the conspiracy of silence. That was the first thing I wrote about. Because of these. Yeah, Harriet says, B, that yeshiva approach was traumatic. Yeah, I can't believe it. I'm sorry you experienced that trauma, of course. And our most recent study shows indeed that what happened after the Holocaust was totally decisive in the long aftermath afterwards. So it's not just Holocaust experiences, it's what happened afterwards. And that's true of the survivors and of their children. I want to go to the very last comment We are really doing it on time. This is extraordinary. So Eva Rossi from Italy is saying, writing again, thank you for sharing such personal stories. While in Italy, I shared my story during the pro-Palestinian parades after October 7th to counteract Hamas narrative. She's bringing us to the present. The response was a positive one. However, trauma caught up with me. Past memories began interlacing with the hostages. I was in Ukraine during the war, and now that riots are exploding, I feel pressured to write, but I'm frozen. I'm in the United States, and since my grandfather was in the Jewish resistance, I have mixed documents. Can you help? Absolutely. I think it again, if you write to me, I can then forward it to the other wonderful writers here. I'm sure each, unless you already want to. Okay, she also asks, how can I find documents as my grandfather was a Jewish resistance fighter? It seems he was born in Michigan. I was searching for my grandmother and kept finding, quotes, dead ends in camps. My mom wanted me to find her living family as she died. First time she ever spoke of being Jewish. Wow. That's, yeah. It's part of, yeah. Anybody wants to comment on that? Because, yeah.
It's a tall order.
Yes. But you've done it, Aaron. Why don't you share some of your
I
writing?
mean, I was shocked at how much can be found. There's some things that will never be known, never be found. In Arlsen, Arlsen, Germany, there's an archive with millions and millions of documents.
Right.
It is now open to the public, and it's, I think, also through Yad Vashem. And if you send them names, they often will find documents. Like on my mother, lots of documents. On one of my father's brothers, who I could never find any documentation, there was one little sliver that gave his name, his date of birth, and his date of death. Just knowing when he died was as important to me as having a tombstone, because it gave some closure. So it's sometimes very hard to find anything. Other times, both Marty and I walked into the archives at Auschwitz and gave them names, and we both came away with documents about our fathers, their prisoner number, and all kinds of information about them that they have. The Germans were very good at keeping documents. So
yeah, that was part of the Nuremberg trial, right?
I did the book on the Romanian Holocaust.
Right.
I found a document from like 1911. I found a school transcript of the person who I was doing his memoir. His family never knew that he went to a school in Dresden. Now, Dresden, as you know, was firebombed during the war. And yet, within a couple of weeks, I got all his transcripts from when he went to a community college in Dresden. So don't be discouraged. Give it a try. You'll be amazed what you could find if you push the right buttons.
So to be clear, the name of the archives is AROLSEN, Arlsen Archives, online with that URL.
Thank you so much, Marty. This is an excellent. Eva writes, did that. My problem is the mixed documents. My great-grandmother goes far back to Pitigliano, or Little Jerusalem. My mom visited another resistance fighter in Jerusalem, Dan V. Segri. Thank you for sharing that, Eva. Keep at it. This is, I think, the message from this successful panel. Successful in, I don't mean others are not, of course. I mean successful in publishing and having struggled with all of these frustrating circuitous routes. But we are here for you, so you know the number. I want to add to this good news the agreement between Trump and Netanyahu. So now it's all in Hamas's hands. I'm cheating a little, but I couldn't not do that, of course. So it's now in Hamas's hand, and if it's accepted, we will have the hostages in 72 hours.
Wow.
Prayers, prayers, prayers. We are during Slichot time in the high holidays. So it is time to wish everyone Shana Tova and Gmar Chatima Tova. We even have a 105-year-old to wish Gmar Chatima Tova. You all thought your parents were old. Well, I have news for you. Aron beats it. And I want to also share with everyone that on October 8th, the day after October 7th, we will have a webinar on the film called Torn, about the scene in New York after the posters of the hostages were put on, where people were tearing them, right? Literally, New York became the battlefield. It's a fantastic film. We will have a special way of showing it. So please look for we will publish it tomorrow. Okay, so not immediately today, because of course every participant in the film is very, very busy at this time. But I suggest that we all watch it. I've watched it and I cannot get it out of my mind, of course. So please join us again. And I cannot thank you enough. You were just as perfect as could be. And I hope we stay in touch and we all embrace the issue of joining together around the world, so nobody feels lonely, in that way at least. So Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Have an
Thank you.
easy fast.
Oh, I promised people last words of yours, right? Oh my God, I almost forgot. If any one of you wants to say your last word, this is your time.
I'll say something because
Wonderful.
it
Thank
came up
you.
a few times. I'd like to address the writers out there and those who feel compelled to tell their family story, whether it's through drama and tragedy or humor and comedy. Our storytelling skills are critical because they humanize us as the world tries to dehumanize us constantly, and it's only escalating. It gives us a chance to defang the stereotypes and the tsunami of anti-Semitic misinformation and disinformation. And the other thing I would say is, our family stories, as I've discovered, and I think all the other panelists have discovered, is they're not packaged nice little essays. They're not just handed to you with a nice little ribbon on it. They come in fragments and kind of these unsolicited confessions. I know for me, my father blurted out some amazing stuff while watching Schindler's List. That's how I discovered how his mother perished in a hospital. It was just an astonishing moment. So if you can, I would encourage, the writers whose parents are still with us or family is still with us, is to just get them talking over dinner, give them cocktails, smoke cannabis, if that's what it takes. Because there's a few things about them that I guarantee you didn't know. And in the process, you will learn quite a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other last words? Come on, I know you have more.
Yeah, thank you for setting this up. I was not particularly enthusiastic about doing this personal, but I think regardless of how it landed for everyone viewing, I know how it landed for me, and I think we all share that. This made a difference for us. Thank you, Yael.
Thank you.
I just want to say that there's always a reason to hope. Even in the darkest of times, there's always a reason to hope. And remember that.
It's hard. It's hard.
Didn't say it's easy, but
But you're right. We have to at least make that attempt.
Aron, you have your chance, and the last one will be the youngest one. So, Aron, this is your chance.
The only thing,
You want to say your last word, to leave us with your last word?
yes, I guess my last word would be take every opportunity to talk to the people, especially if your parents, whatever stage of life you're in. Don't be afraid to ask people about their lives, even if at first they don't want to talk about it. Ask again, because it's good for them and it's good for you. And it's just tragic to lose people that have stories that are so important because you didn't ask. And I never asked my father. I got things secondhand. So I'm sorry about that. So if you have some questions, ask them.
I hope he's hearing you. It is Slichot time, so it's good time to do that. In Val, our baby here, even though your daughter is already gone. Go ahead, darling. Your last word. What would you like to share?
Just that the webinar with the news together is so overwhelming. And I told everyone before all the audience centers that I'm worried there will be alarm during the webinar. And it's all for me put together and can distinguish between the two, between the Holocaust there and the terrible times we were having here and the trauma that everything in my life experienced now. And I just want to go out from here full of hope. And it was a wonderful experience to me. So thank you for the speakers. It was wonderful to meet you and to hear you. It was a great present for me. And I just want just to have hope. So for good future for ourselves and to our children and grandchildren, that they won't have to write about trauma. No more books.
Amen.
Thank you.
So stay in touch, guys.
Yes.
Love you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Ah.